who are here. We'll allow folks to jump on as they go, but I am going to start this podcast and we are going to hit live, and then we'll get started. Are the panelists all good to go? Are you guys all set?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I am going to start the live stream. And then once I hit the live stream, I'll allow for folks to also feel free to share the link. You guys can take a minute to share your links with your friends and family who may not be on the Zoom. Okay.
We're all matching.
I speak faster than my internet, so bear with me, guys, as we go live. All right, we are going. We are live now. All right, we'll get started. All right, thank you everyone for joining. As you guys know, this is a podcast recording that API Vote Michigan does on a monthly basis. On this special episode of API Vote Michigan's Unfiltered Identity podcast, we are going to address the rise of anti-Asian hate and hate crimes. Listeners' discretion is strongly advised.
We are your hosts, Rebecca, Kevin, and Dan. Rebecca and I will be your moderator for this evening. Kevin will be moderating the chat box for audience comments and questions. Our podcast standard formula for the Unfiltered Identity is usually anonymous with a fun T name and strictly audio only. We designed it this way for privacy for our participants as well as our hosts. Our team felt today's topic deserved a special episode for which we are showing our identities for the hosts, audience, and the panelists, but leaving it optional for our audience members.
Unfiltered Identity is brought to you by API Vote Michigan, a nonprofit organization, 501c3, nonpartisan organization committed to justice, equity for the Asian American Islander community here in Michigan through grassroots mobilization, civic engagement, leadership development, and coalition building.
We here at Unfiltered Identity will discuss a wide range of topics and perspectives with respect while also pushing the envelope. Full disclaimer, hosts and guests will share their opinions. The opinions of our guests are strictly their own and do not represent the opinions of Unfiltered Identity or APIA Vote Michigan.
Our team has designed this podcast to give a platform for those who feel unheard and as such, and we encourage everyone to be hosts and guests.
Please subscribe and share. We upload episodes every first Saturday of the month. This episode is a live stream. The recorded audio will be released for our April episode. Welcome to Unfiltered Identity.
This special episode today has been created to give the community a healing space given the recent uprising of anti-Asian hate crimes across the U.S. and the world, the most recent one in Cherokee County in Metro Atlanta, Georgia. We'd like to take this opportunity to hold this conversation with Asian Pacific Islander American community leaders and members to share their thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Our team acknowledges this is a very scary and difficult time for our community and other people of color communities. This space is designed for us. All feelings and experiences are valid. You are welcome here.
So we will ask the questions. Each question will take about 5 minutes in total to answer, not 5 minutes per person per question. After our panelists complete the answer, we will open it up to you, the audience, to share your thoughts. You may share your thoughts in the chat box, or you can raise your hand so we can unmute you. Kevin will moderate the questions or comments in the chat and ask the panelists your question if you decide to type your question. When you request to unmute with a question or a comment, please announce your preferred name so that way our listeners may know who is speaking. This is for the audio recording for the podcast. This includes the hosts. We would like everyone to be respectful and mindful of each other.
Our panelists today are Representative Padma Kupa, serving Michigan's 14th House District, Professor Rolling Wong from University of Michigan, MAPEC Commissioner and Professor Aisha Ghazi at University of Michigan, human rights and disability community activist Lily Chang Shutland.
All right, so let's get right into it. So welcome everybody again to Unfiltered Identity. So we're gonna get started with our first question for our panelists. And again, it is open to the panelists' floor. So the first question we have is, describe your feelings about living in America today, given the rise of anti-Asian hate.
I'll go first since no one else has stepped up. I still feel very proud of being a Michigander and of living in this country because we're actually confronting hate by talking about it. I think we're very fortunate that we have the opportunity to speak about these things. It is really hard to talk about these things as an Asian American woman. I think there's a double-edged sword there. One, as an Asian American, my mom always said, you can't change other people's actions. You can only change your reactions. And so the urge to speak up and say something when you feel hurt isn't necessarily there. And then the other piece of it, as a woman, we're not always taught to rock the boat. We're taught to, get along, accept, and sort of, so both of those sort of help silence me. And I think one of the challenges I see is that our power isn't helping others. And so that is what I've always sought to do. And so making sure that this concept of seva that's so intrinsic to my life as a Hindu, I really like to speak about how volunteering is the ultimate exercise in democracy. And so if we want to see things change, we must participate and, turn the other cheek, as they say in the Christian tradition, even if we do face hurt. But there are times when you just want to withdraw into yourself and take some time. And I think that's not the time. This is not the time to do that. This is the time to step up and share, because this is something that we know is very problematic, is that hate crimes themselves are not often reported, and hate crimes against Asian Americans are even less reported.
Thank you so much, Padma. It's still open to the floor.
Can I go next? I think it's a split personality issue. On one hand, I'm very proud to be Asian American and got a great, legacy in history, and I'm honored to teach Asian American history at University of Michigan. Honored to be on a school board and watch the progress of 7,000 students, in the Northville School District, that sort of thing. Honored to be a state advisory committee member to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights to talk about civil rights. But on the other hand, I see the pain that's going on. My class spent a half an hour talking about the killings in Atlanta. A lot of students are really feeling very vulnerable right now. And on the other hand, I'm an immigration lawyer at the International Institute. There are a lot of people that are rushing to take advantage of DACA and naturalization because they're fearful for their futures. And so I think we need to pull up our bootstraps and just make sure everyone's protected. And we need to work on that as a community. So it's really a double-faceted issue, how we feel.
Thank you, Roland. Thank you for sharing that. Lily or Aisha?
Regarding my feelings about this past year and racism in this past year, on the one hand, I am surprised by the kind of racism we've had this last year, that we've had 150% more racism in terms of actual racist violence and slurs and blaming and scapegoating. On the other hand, we've always had racism, and it's lurked under the surface. And so when we had a president that blamed Asians and connected Asian Americans to the disease of coronavirus, I think that is unusual, but yeah, it's a good time to really think about the racism that was always there under the surface, whether it was interpersonal or systematic.
I can go. So, I think that this crime hits upon like complex identity groups who are really scapegoated, right? You had working class immigrants. It brought up the issue of the over-sexualization and objectification of Asian American women that has been a long-standing issue in this country. And at the same time, I think so that was devastating, but it was issues that were always there, as Lily said. At the same time, what's amazing is the solidarity that we're seeing, but we also have to remember that's also always been there. That's also been a part of our history. I mean, Black Panthers marching to change 1963 immigration quotas for why we're here. Vincent Chin's case being tried as a federal hate crime, that was Black Panthers who joined us in solidarity. So it's a moment that I'm proud to say that there's so many people that are standing in solidarity, and it's a history we can't forget, and we have to.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for sharing. At this time, we'd like to open it up to the audience. If anyone from the audience would like to come on the mic and say something, you can raise your hand and we'll give you the option to unmute yourself, or you may put your comments in the chat box and Kevin or Ellie from our team will read those out for us.
We have one comment from Larry Lipton saying, "Hello, Padma. Thank you for all of your work for the 41st District, as well as for all of us in Michigan." And from Sharon Allen, "Conversation is what is needed when people are afraid to speak up. Racism will continue."
We also have Dora that would like to make a comment. Dora, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi. Hopefully you guys can't see me because I'm not prepared for that. But as everyday citizens, how can we make sure that everyone's protected? Like, what steps can we take? Because so much of this now it's publicized, but it hasn't been previously. But what can everyday people do for action?
Thank you, Dora. That is actually one of the questions we will get in the later part of our program. I also see that Bing also would like to say something. Bing, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good evening, and thank you all for being here. I appreciate the comments made by our panelists. My recommendation is that, or my concerns is that oftentimes those of us who are part of the APA community don't know our history. And because we don't know our history, we don't sometimes know how to react. It's like someone else already mentioned, the racism against Asian Americans has gone back as far in the 1800s already. We are the only ethnic group that even Congress institutionalized by making a constitutional amendment that prevented Chinese from ever becoming United States citizens by their 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. And I don't know how to respond to people who are saying, what do we do next? Because there are some things that we can do and just some things that I think is just a waste of our time and energy. I mean, it's like when I hear people say, stop Asian hate, or we can do better, we are on this all together. It's like me hearing people say, you're in our thoughts and prayers. I think that we as a nation, as an APA community, we need to first and foremost do what Representative Pupa did, which is to run for office, because it's only from the inside that we can make changes. I think that when we approach our elected officials, whether it's at local or state or federal levels, we have to be very specific about what it is that we want. And we shouldn't be embarrassed to ask for what is rightfully us as citizens of this great country. We have to be very proactive, and we have to be very clear about the things that we believe will help us change the narratives that has been going on for many, many years in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Bing. Since this is our first question and we really want to hear how the community is feeling, I'm going to allow a few more folks to, I'm going to welcome a few more folks to share their thoughts. Next, we have Linda. Linda, go ahead.
Hi, this is Linda. And so my question is, I just recently heard that in March, there was over 3,800 incidences reported violence against Asian Americans. So that someone just recently said that is like 150% more. And we know that a lot of these kinds of behaviors aren't even being reported. And I just wanted to ask, in Michigan, do we have a program or are we starting to develop a program where we can mobilize people in the community to spot those individuals that support a hate crime bill, an anti-hate crime bill? I know that there's one federally, that HR 908, but also I'm just interested in what can we do right here in our communities and to get the information and mobilize our communities to work together.
Thank you, Linda. We will have a Q&A session towards the end of our program. At this time, we're just asking the community to describe the same question that we asked our panelists. We're opening it up to our audience as well to describe your feelings about living in America today, given everything that has been happening with the recent uprising and anti-Asian hate. So if the audience would like to share their feelings and answer this question at this time, we're welcoming those folks. I do see about 2 more hands, and I will allow for those folks to comment. Silk Wilkinson, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having this program. Appreciate all the comments made by all the speakers and Bing's question, Bing's comment about us learning about our history and so on. The more we are armed or equipped with knowing who we are and what our history is, that would really help us move forward and chart our future. I had the privilege to edit a book called Asian Americans in Michigan. It's 5 years old, along with Professor Victor Ju of University of Wisconsin. And that book can be a resource because it has a lot of different essays written by different individuals. And so I'd like to suggest that book to be put on the reading list for everybody. And again, it's really wonderful to have this kind of forum because personally, I feel devastated. I feel alone. I feel anxious. I feel like I need to be very careful wherever I go to. And, it's important that we have an opportunity like this to air that out and to say it out loud. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suk, for sharing your experiences and being open and vulnerable with your feelings. And it looks like I saw Tristram have something to say as well.
Yes, my name is Tristram Craig. I'm the first vice president for the North Macomb County NAACP. And I just wanted to say it's all about inclusion of all cultures and all people. And if we all work together, very much like we're coming together tonight, we need to stick together with each other and support each other. And someone was just mentioning a few minutes ago about passing legislation, different laws that will protect the rights of people because it's a violation of our rights, our human rights. It's what's going on right now in this era that's going on in not just Michigan, but all over the United States. And that's not the country I grew up in when I grew up. I experienced the civil rights marches back in the 60s and racism back then and how it changed. And I thought things were much for the better now. However, over these last 4 or 5 years, I see that it's just as bad as it was back in the 60s right now. I'd just like to say that, but the main thing is we need to all stick together and come together there's strength in numbers, and if we support each other, we'll be stronger together to be able to deal with all of this oppression that we're facing.
Thank you so much, Tristan, for sharing that. That was very, very in-depth.
Thank you.
I have one more person. Donnie, you may go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, I really appreciate everyone coming together and having this discussion. And I just wanted to echo Tristan's comment about solidarity across different groups and minorities. That is something that as a younger person, I mean, I'm near 30, but still younger person, attending a vigil yesterday and hearing people speak about it, that cross-cultural unity and understanding legislation is so important. Stephanie Chang was there as senator, and then also Mai Zhang, the new commissioner in Macomb, was also present to speak about legislation and efforts to curb this kind of hatred. So the one that was passed last Thursday was Resolution 30, and there's still some that we can be very actively paying attention to as well. I would say, I posted in the chat, there's bystander prevention training through Hollerback and the Chicago chapter of Asian Americans Advancing Justice. But, you know, I'm part of a younger organization myself, so I would love to connect with you guys after this as well about additional training workshops and the point about education too. So,
thank you, Donnie. We have one more person who would like to make a comment. Lynn, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Lynn Song. I'm a city council representative in Ann Arbor. And I guess I just want to reflect on a lot of things I've been hearing from the Ann Arbor community is, I guess, an understanding of what remedies are available to folks who are experiencing harassment or violence or threats. And it's been really difficult for folks to be open and understand what it means to report to the police and whether that presents more of a a more difficult situation, especially if folks are undocumented or are non-citizens. But so what I'm hoping for is I'm hoping that the community can speak to this, can speak to what does social justice mean for the Asian American community? What does incarceration mean for our community? I'm working on a mirror resolution that Senator Chang had passed in the State House and Senate here at City Council. And I know the same work is being done at the county level here in Washington County. And I invite folks to give public comments, reach out to the representatives to say this is important. In Ann Arbor, the Asian American community is comprised of, is 18% of our population. It's our largest racial group and racial minority group. But I think, with Midwest Nice kind of dominating how we speak about race, if at all, it doesn't really rise up to the political level like we should expect it to. So even though we might ask folks to run for office, we really need the community to show up when this legislation comes up, but also when policies come up that impact communities of color, right? I mean, we need folks to practice what it means to show up and do the right thing when it comes to housing, when it comes to transportation, just equitable policies all around, and understand that all voices need to weigh in so that we can better the entire community. So I hope, in all the sadness that I'm hearing, the shock that I'm hearing from the community, I hope out of that will come some productiveness in how we organize. I know my children, I have a teenager and they're demanding answers, and I can only speak to Vincent Chin's death and assign them so much reading, and until, we need to demonstrate the same kind of political will that we see in other communities, so that when they come of age and vote, they have a reason to vote and know that there's a place and a seat for them too. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. At this time, I'm just going to, I did see a few comments come into the chat room about how folks are feeling right now, and I do want to acknowledge those. I'm going to ask Kevin if you want to just share some of the comments that came into the chat room. Again, at this time, we are just checking in with the community to see how everyone's feeling. Q&A sessions will come near the end, so if folks can just hold on to those questions, we will address those at the end. Kevin or Ellie, if you would like to read a few comments that came into the chat room regarding how our community is feeling right now.
Yes, I can read some. We have some very important comments that came in. One of the comments states, I feel vulnerable and scared as an Asian American at this time. I don't feel safe going out by myself, and that I need to be with another person just to do my everyday tasks or errands. I'm hoping this session will assist my apprehension of what is going on. Thank you. We also received another comment that said, I'm greatly saddened by hate against many different cultures, colors, gender identities in our country. I think now more than ever, we need action and love.
Thank you. Now we will turn it back to our panel. You've heard comments from the community. If there's anything that the panel would like to add, this would be the time.
I wanted to add quickly that, there was some discussion about what can be done and what is being done. Are there bystander interventions? So MAPAC, the Michigan Asian Pacific American Affairs Commission, is going to start doing a series of town halls. We're partnering with different city entities, county entities that are open to the public. They're going to teach about discrimination. How do you talk about it with kids? How do you talk about it in the classroom? If you're a bystander, how do you do that bystander intervention? How are you feeling? Where can you get support services? So we'll share that information as we have it. There's an additional event happening this Friday, March 26th, also open to the public by MAPAC, about connecting the past to the present. And I appreciated that comment about the need for us to know our history. I think another way for us to know our history is we need to actively advocate for school curriculums to also include Asian American history. I think that's pertinent, that's of utmost importance. A lot of people don't know that there's a history to why it's so difficult to call a crime that involves an Asian American a hate crime. We weren't allowed to. That was part of policy, and people don't understand that. So these were all really great issues, and I wanted to name both of those things.
Thank you, Aisha. Connie had a comment from the audience. I will allow Connie to go ahead and make her remarks.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so thank you. This is Connie Dang. I just wanted to quickly say, okay, hold on. Somebody just walked into the room here with me. So I just, so along with, reporting and strategies and history, I also wanted to see if we have a list of resources as well as support for especially the young, students. I work for a university. I see that in the midst of everything here, the mental health as well as the care for the young people, we need to pay attention to that. So I was wondering if AAPI Vote or MAPAC has compiled some, resources to support the Asian community, such as mental health, bystander reporting, hate crime reporting, things like that. I'm sorry. Somebody just walked into my room and my mind is really distracted, but I think you got my point.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Connie, for sharing your perspective and your views. So now at this time, we're going to move on to the next question. We'll be asking the panelists, and then of course, as now we've all seen, we'll be asking the audience as well. So with the next question that we have is, how do you confront anti-Asian rhetoric, specifically with other marginalized communities? And this is open to the floor for the panelists.
If I can venture a guess, I'd say that we have to figure out that we're working in allyship. We are all subject to the same, I guess, supremacy structures that, different groups are facing, but, we should not be fighting over pieces of the pie. It's really a matter of all taking on a concerted effort against the idea of white supremacy or majority supremacy or the othering of several communities. I mean, several communities are picked on because they are not considered, mainstream American, whether it's Asian, Latino, African American, whatever. And we have to work in concert. That's got to be part of the conversation, one-on-one or community group to community group. I think that's what has to occur.
Very valuable. Thank you so much, Roland, for sharing. It is open for everyone else.
So I want to just acknowledge, I represent Troy and Clawson, the two cities here in Oakland County. And one of the things that we've always known is that Troy has the infrastructure in place to engage diversity. Well, first it was the Ethnic Issues Advisory Board back in 2002. Today we have a Global Troy Advisory Committee. And in fact, our city council in this city that has the highest population of ethnically diverse, I think 1 in 5 people in Troy, or more than that actually, 29.9% of Troy is actually born in another country. And to see that we are already issuing a proclamation and planning things that both several of our city council people who are not Asian American, not one of them is Asian American, are engaging in the work that needs to be done as allies. And so I think that's really important that we recognize that. I think a lot of that started with what happened after 9/11. Some people decided that we needed to form this organization, Ethnic Issues Advisory Board. I served on that. And then from there, we went on, we formed the Troy Interfaith Group, which is now expanded to become the Troy Area Interfaith Group. And I really want to give importance to an organization that helped us travel these difficult times. And that is the Michigan Roundtable. It's an 80-plus-year-old organization, Michigan Roundtable for Diversity and Inclusion, which helps you build relationships. Because at the bottom line is that we need to build relationships. We need to hear each other. And I think that's what the purpose of this event is. I'm hearing so many people with so many ideas and thoughts, and I'm sure that we're going to put it all together and we're going to become stronger and more cohesive. As I said earlier, power comes from within, especially when we have all these intersectionality points. Am I Asian? Am I Indian? Am I Hindu? Am I a woman? Like, what are these different points that I am at these cross sections of? And how do we take that and say, at the end of the day, we're all human and we all have pain. And to find that common ground is really important. And we do that by having allies who are in a position of privilege. And it will vary. At some point, I'm going to have privilege. At some point, somebody else is going to have privilege. I'm not very good at social media. I'm not good at all these terms, doxing or cancel culture. These are things that came up in social, through social media today. And so, having a young person like Dan, who's really, in the know, and also talking to people who have more experience, like Suk Wilkinson or Roland, who ran for office way before I even thought of coming into politics, right? And I also think that running for office is part of the journey. I think that, that we should get involved first and find out what are the needs in your community that you can help with, and sort of normalize our being part of the mainstream community. I think that's part of our opportunity that we have to take as Asian Americans as well, not to sit on the sidelines, but to be actively engaged. Because diversity is a given. It's about counting people. We are all diverse. But when you consider that inclusion is getting a seat at the table, where we are right now is that we aren't always being heard, right? Is that the idea of gaslighting, right, Dan? I think that's right. And so making sure that we have allies who are sitting next to us who recognize that when we speak and we say something, that nobody is gaslighting us or questioning us, and taking the time to really hear and understand the challenges that we're facing, or the suggestions. Sometimes it's not even a challenge, right? I might have an idea. And it happened to me a lot of the time as an engineer in the automotive world. You know, I would say something, but like nobody heard me. The guy next to me said it and they heard it. And so, you know, as a female in a typically male dominant profession, I think a lot of people can speak to that. Like, women are not still in large numbers becoming engineers or technology professionals. And so as we enter these arenas that are typically male dominated, we need to sort of speak a little bit louder. And I think that's really important that we do that.
Thank you so much, Representative Padmakappa. That was really, really beautifully worded. We have Lily and Aisha.
Yes, so can you hear me? Oh, yes. So this, I'm pretty active on social media, I have to say that. And most people have really supported me and all of us, all Asians. And so, but there were actually a few that took this time to question whether they should help Asians if Asians haven't previously stepped up to help with Black Lives Matter, or if they saw incidences of prejudice in some way, which, you know, we certainly can work on as a community. And so, yeah, there's a lot of us that said, hey, you know, we're trying to build trust here. And I said, well, I've been active in the community for years, standing for equality and justice and equity. And I'm not the only one, that there are other Asians who do it. We haven't done it as a group yet. And I certainly would like to do that, to build that trust across with all communities of color and allies. And in addition to building that trust, we have to help them understand this idea of whether we call it supremacy or white supremacy, but it's the idea that dehumanizes other people. And we're all in that boat. And we should not be competing with each other for those limited resources. In fact, we should just get rid of that lie altogether, get rid of the lie of supremacy and say, hey, we're all human beings. Don't dehumanize us. And let's work together. Let's have the same vision, because as human beings, we should be respected. We should be loved. We're equals. And that's it. And so it's to our advantage, no matter what marginalized community we're in, what people of color community we're in, that we work together. And yeah, I would like to see Asians step up, because I think it builds trust. And we need to do that. I mean, I know lots of Asians, while I was running for office as the Democratic nominee last year, said to me, oh, Asians don't get involved in politics. Oh, that sounds great. But it's important. It's important because that's where the seat of power is. And that's how we change society. In addition to community activism, we need that too.
Thank you so much, Lily. Aisha, do you have anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I was just reading a study about how the more diverse the identities in a room, the more innovative and inventive the solutions are that they come up with. And I think that that is so important. And we need to remember that, like, you know, when we have solidarity with other marginalized communities, we're more powerful together. And when we don't have solidarity with each other, it sets a precedent. So if one group has been discriminated against and dehumanized, it becomes easier for another group. You know that poem, Then They Came for Me? You see it happening in real life. So I think that's something that we always have to be mindful of. And we also have to think about how do we as a community potentially replicate anti-Blackness within our own community? And how do we potentially feed it as well? You know, Roland Hung, he runs an organization that just got a grant on really confronting anti-Blackness. American Citizens for Justice did, confronting anti-Blackness within our community. And how do we perpetuate it? And I think that we also need to confront how we potentially perpetuate discrimination, right? So I think solidarity, diversity is so important. It makes us more powerful. And fighting anytime that we see someone else oppressed or marginalized it's imperative. We have to do it, because if we don't, it sets a precedent and we could be next.
Thank you, Aisha. That is very important. And that's why we want to ask that question about the infighting. And that is something that is very dangerous, because like we were talking about, it can help perpetuate things. So at this time, we'll allow Kevin and Ally to take a look at the comment box. And now we are shifting that question over to you as the audience. So you have the option to answer that same question. Just raise your hand, and then Ally and Kevin can keep an eye out.
Great. In the meantime, I'm going to read some of the comments that we've been receiving. We do have one that says, since I'm not Asian American, my feelings would be different. When I encounter anti-Asian rhetoric or behavior, I confront it calmly and respectfully, but firmly. If the individual persists or reacts defensively or rationalizes, I may respond that I'm happy to know your opinion, but that's a very racist statement. If it escalates from there, I don't respond further and leave. And then we also have one that says, I would just like all of my Asian American neighbors to know that you have allies in your community who will stand with you. I'm proud of everyone speaking out. I'm a white male and I would be happy to fight racism with you. And then we don't currently have any hands up in attendees. We do have one from Bing.
Thank you, and thank you for the comments from our panelists. We're right on target. You know, the former Texas Governor Ann Richardson once said, if you're not at the table, you are part of the menu. So I do believe that it is important that what Reverend Buka was able to do, Senator Chang, what Lily was willing to do in terms of running for office. We need to encourage our young, well, not even so young, it doesn't have to be young, people who are willing to make the sacrifices to run for office, whether it's a local office, whether it's a state office, federal office, or even just joining boards, local boards. Many decisions are made at those meetings where there are no Asian representatives, and that's part of the challenge that we are facing today. The other part of this is that I think it's important for us to realize that, and to acknowledge that we do have, as an Asian community, challenging discussions that need to be had with our other minority and underrepresented groups. We know from history that the Asian Pacific American community and the African American community have difference of opinions about each other. And we can't ignore that. We know that we have to have that discussion, yet we haven't been able to have that discussion for a variety of reasons. So I think that those things have to be discussed if we are going to be united in our efforts to eradicate racism and to bring equity into our society. And I think the other part of it is that we as an Asian American community, we must begin to highlight and to be proud of the accomplishments that we have been contributing to not only to the state of Michigan or our local communities, but also what we've done nationally. We are one of the fastest rising populations. We are also one of the fastest rising communities with buying power. Our economic growth is expanding and increasing. In Kent County, where I live, the Asian American business community contributes 51.7% of all the minority business contributions to Kent County's GDP. But when I mentioned that, when I referenced that data and statistics to people in Kent County, they said, no, that can't be. And I says, it's a study that was done in 2018, and here's the report. So I think we need to begin to highlight our own accomplishments and not be so quiet about our own accomplishments. We need to develop our own narrative and not let someone else develop the narrative for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Bing. That was really, really good.
I just want to say something, and I think that's one of our challenges in response to what Bing just said. Bing, you're so right. We need to be able to highlight our accomplishments, but also remember that, you know, coming from a culture where you're not supposed to brag, you're not supposed to be self-centered. It is almost like I'm at war within myself when I have to tout my accomplishments. And so it's really hard as, you know, coming from the culture that I do and the background that I do, that, you know, to say I did this or I did that, because that's kind of seen as being very self-centered. And then when you do say it, when people say, oh, well, you know, and this happens to women a lot, and I'm sure the women on the panel will understand and the women in the audience will understand, there are words that are used that are not so kind when we are driven or when we have ambition. And so, you know, you kind of get crushed between those two, you know, opposing situations where you want to speak up, but if you do speak up, then you're judged. And so making sure that people realize that, you know, it comes from a very difficult place to speak up and say what we've accomplished. But when we do, if we're judged, that makes it even harder to speak up another time.
You know, if I could also jump in, I agree totally with Representative Koopa. And I also think, too, we have to be wary of not reinforcing the model minority myth. Because we have to remember that that was created as a form of anti-Blackness, right? As a form of whites telling the Asian American community, you guys did it right. And it's racist. And it really generalizes the diverse experiences and disparities that exist within the Asian American community. I mean, one of the fastest rates of poverty, for example, are Chinese Americans, Indian Americans. A lot of people don't know that. They think that we're all engineers, we're all doctors. So it's important for us to celebrate, right? It's also important for us to break and smash this model minority myth that we're all doing really well all the time. There's some of us that really need to speak up, and we need to be better represented, and we need to fight for our rights.
So if I could follow that up, yes, thank you so much to Padma and Aisha. That is amazing. Padma, I laughed when you mentioned that about women highlighting their accomplishment, Asian women, because I think I said the exact same thing to Bing a month ago, said the exact same thing to Bing, that it is hard as an Asian and then as a woman as well. But I especially appreciated your comment about being an Asian and a woman and being judged for being ambitious. And that, so we definitely need a support group because we will have a target on our back. And as far as Aisha, I mean, the model minority, I agree that there's a lot of problems with it. In addition to what Aisha mentioned, the model minority is limiting. It creates this bamboo ceiling that takes away our voice as Asians. I mean, it says that, you know, we're either in medicine or we're in math, science, engineering, and that our voices are not important outside of those fields. And we are not creative, and we don't have a voice, and we don't have an independent voice. So that's why, you know, it really works against us, because a lot of us are creative, we care about the world, you know, so any type of stereotype is is not effective. And I think Asians have to realize that there is something not great about the model minority. And even if we are, by the way, in those fields of engineering or medicine, there will still be a bamboo ceiling there, because rising up in those fields require a different type of personal skills and management skills, executive skills. And so that bamboo ceiling is there. And like being said, we want to have a seat at the table. I think that will affect our entire Asian AAPI community and help us to bring change in society for our community and for all people of color and for everyone, for our allies, because we all want to live in a world where everyone is valuable.
It's important to note that the model minority myth was coined in 1966 by William Peterson in the New York Times. And the complexion of our community has changed drastically since then. And we really have to let people know that our community is very diverse, that the income inequality in our community is vaster than in the other communities, and that needs to be addressed. Data disaggregation is a battle in order to get recognition for those groups of Asian Americans that have been left behind. And I think that's important to just state.
And not just recognition, but funding, right? Like after 9/11, with data not being desegregated, it was difficult to really identify what groups were experiencing a lot of the Islamophobia. And that affected funding, for bullying. Then in general, the poverty rising, the rates of poverty that are rising within the Chinese American and Indian American, if we do not advocate that the complexities of our population should never just be reduced to being one stereotype, then we won't be adequately assisted. Our needs are not going to be addressed if we're all just engineers and doctors. So it's harmful.
Thank you, panelists, for sharing that. At this time, we're still taking a few more comments. If Kevin, if you would like to go ahead and read some of the several comments that came into the chat box, and I think it's worth for us to acknowledge those.
Yes, we have a comment that says the systemic racism pits minorities against each other by emphasizing the scarcity of resources. Historically, AAPIs have had some privileges and also discrimination, which has been used as a political and economic scapegoating. Black Lives Matter and AAPI support are a shared fight for equity, opportunities, and mutual aid. And the other comment says, one thing that we must focus on is multiculturalism, learning about each other and understanding how there are more similarities than differences.
Thank you.
We also have a comment that says, I appreciate how even in the moment when the AAPI community is facing so much, you are able to honestly address anti-Blackness and acknowledge their plight as well. A lot of people can learn from this. It's maturity, understanding that it's complex and layered.
Thank you, Ali, and thank you for everyone that shared the comments. We are now going to move on to the next question. And again, this is for our panel. And some of you have already addressed this. We want to know, how are you addressing the concerns around anti-Asian hate with your constituents or the community that you're working with?
So I'm going to go ahead and start that off. I just want to say one of the things that I did when I was in the legislature, when I came into the legislature, was to join the Michigan Legislative Black Caucus. I'm actually the historian for it. And one of the things that we did, in addition to doing an event for Black History Month, was also to bring the redlining exhibit. There's an exhibit with panels that explain the history of redlining and the impact that it has had on the African American community and how it's contributed so many layers of policy that have hurt minority communities, particularly the Black community. And so we brought that as part of Fair Housing Month to talk about how people weren't allowed to buy houses and to have property, even though they could financially afford them. and restrictive covenants and things like that. The other thing is that we actually faced, real violent threats in the Capitol last April. And so, being able to be on calls with my colleagues and say, I'm scared, and to talk to the Michigan State Police and let them know. Unfortunately, we had several incidents where people call it the Chinese virus, and we've called it out. Even most recently, I and many members of the House APA caucus and the Senate, we sent a letter to Senate Majority Leader Shirkey asking him to watch his language because words matter. And yet I have not gotten a call back. I have not heard anything in response because I want him, if he's willing to talk to the people who brought guns to threaten us in the Capitol, he should be willing to sit down with leaders from the APA community. And, he has made no extension of interest, no expression of interest in being willing to sit down and hear people's concerns. So that's something that is very challenging because you try to reach out, you try to build bridges. And when people refuse, then that's when you need allies. That's when others who can have more influence on him need to speak up. Because obviously being a state rep as a brown woman from a frontline district here in Troy and Clawson, my voice was not enough. And even though it was coupled with many of my colleagues. And then the other thing I will say is that we have been, Senator Chang and I have been raising this issue. In fact, the first call that the Governor Whitmer had with all the legislators when COVID first hit our state in 2020 in March, that first conference call that we had, it wasn't a Zoom because we didn't have Zoom yet. My first question was, how are we going to ensure that our Asian American community, our Chinese American community is not harmed? Because a lot of the time people can't even tell the difference between a Korean, a lot of the white community. I mean, that is why Vincent Chin was beaten to death. And so we really need to make sure that people at the highest levels are aware of these issues and that people are feeling vulnerable. And so I bring it up on many calls. And I also make sure that, we in our communities know. And so Senator Chang and I held a town hall about hate crimes and how to report hate crimes. And I think that is going to be the thing that I will pursue next is how do we encourage people to report? Because if you don't report, we can't act on it. We can't get funding to address the issues because there's mental health issues associated with being bullied, being victimized, and microaggressions that are made against us. And so really the mental health costs, the productivity of a person is related to how safe they feel. And so it's really important that we report these things so that we can empower people. And so that will be the next thing that Senator Chang and I are already discussing, how we can get more people to report and create those safe spaces like this for people to speak up and share their concerns.
Well, would any of our other panelists like to comment on this question?
I think it's a good idea to revisit history with respect to allyship. During the Vincent Chin case, we wanted to meet with the prosecutor about the case. It took allyship with New Detroit and Detroit Association of Black Organizations and the Anti-Defamation League to wedge the door open so we could have a talk with Bill Cahalan back then on the Chin case. Mm-hmm. But the same thing is occurring now with American Citizens for Justice, working with Black men and boys of color and the Kresge Foundation. We are revisiting that allyship and working with the NAACP Detroit chapter, Black Family Development and Hispanic Development Corporation on anti-Blackness and anti-racism. So, the allyship endures, now. It's just the same model as we had during the Chin case. it's being revisited now. So.
I wanted to just quickly add. So and just to touch upon what Roland was sharing. I mean, Roland was involved in the Vincent Chin case. He was there back then. American Citizens for Justice is an organization founded by the Trust of the Vincent Chin family. That organization, it exists. It's in Detroit, and its mission is to fight discrimination. So we urge you guys to check them out. The other thing is that we haven't really talked about is like, how do we prevent re-traumatization happening, especially with our East Asian brothers and sisters after they face discrimination, and how does that potentially play into why they don't want to report it? For example, I released a statement on behalf of APAC recently about our disgust with what's happened in Atlanta and how horrified we were. And my administrative assistant has been getting calls off the hook from people who've been calling, saying racial slurs. And I've now had to really talk to the communications office at the state level and say, like, listen, I think there's some re-traumatization. Like, I don't want this. How do we prevent this? And I think that as we move forward and we start talking about like de-escalation and healing spaces, we also have to talk about like, this is really difficult for people. It calls into question who they are and who we've been raised to believe who we are. And I think that's something that also needs to be talked about.
Great, sure.
Yeah, I would just like to add to that. Yeah, mental health is very important. And I think someone did mention something about support group, but I think that is also a good way to go, especially if someone needs to report a crime. They shouldn't feel alone in reporting a crime or do it by themselves. They should have others supporting them to go report the crime if they have to fill out papers with the police department. So doing that together and I've been thinking about many ideas over the last 2 years. I know Bing and I and others, we have thought about the idea of just ways to mobilize the communities. And so we were doing that with some members of the NAACP locally and the Latino groups, and we're trying to reach out to other groups when COVID happened. And so that just put, that stopped it for the time being. But it's certainly a good thing to pursue is just the idea of mobilizing all communities of color together locally. And I think that will help a lot. And maybe consider as we're fighting any type of supremacy that we have codes of professional conduct, whether it's in political parties or any groups, that they should have codes of professional conduct, and hopefully that would lessen the hate and any actions of hate.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to open up the audience to make any comments. I do see a hand already by Minnie. Minnie, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Minnie Moore.
Button. Go ahead.
Okay.
She's muted again.
Oh, okay. Minnie, you can try to unmute yourself if you'd like to make a comment.
No comments.
Thank you. Ellie or Kevin, if there are any comments in the chat box.
Yes, we do have one that says the label model minority was not created by the AAPI community or any of the other underserved communities. We must not allow others' definition of who we are to stop us from contributing to the well-being of everyone. Sharing our successes and failures will make us all human.
Thank you. We have one more hand up. Suk, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
I need to hang up pretty soon, but I wanted to thank the organizers and all the panelists and the participants, because this has been such a cathartic experience for me to be with everybody, listening to you, talking with you, discussing the topic. I haven't had that opportunity out loud recently, so I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you so much
for joining us. I don't see any comments or any other comments.
We have a few comments, 3 comments. We need a critical mass of Asians at the table. There still is a severe lack of Asian representation in leadership positions in many social sectors. Another comment says, the model minority does not serve our community well and dismisses our diverse immigration histories and disparities within our communities. As a former DBIC recipient, ESL student with refugee parents, I can attest to this difference personally. And lastly, it is a difficult challenge to unite our API community and make allies out of right-wing citizens of other ethnicities when they do not recognize that racial disparities and racially motivated hate crimes exist.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for reading those. And we're now going to move on to our next question. But I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge also our Jewish brothers and sisters as well, is that they've also dealt with the exact same model minority stereotype, and that has led to the anti-Semitism. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there as well, because it's not a good, it's bad. So moving on to the very next question we have is, have you felt gaslighted during these times? And for those who don't know, gaslighting means calling into question of your perspective and experiences, or doubting your personal experiences by other people. So this is open to the panel.
I mean, I don't think that in this instance, I mean, I want to be cognizant of right now the hate is targeting East Asians. I'm not East Asian, right? In my own experiences as South Asian, I think after 9/11, yeah. And you begin to wonder and call into question, like, are you experiencing it? Are you just being too sensitive? You know, just people discriminating against religion and race. And I think that you just have to be strong in your conviction and know that no one should ever make you feel less than, no matter what. And if it's happening and if someone is, it's not right, it's wrong. And you should always speak up. I don't know if we've been able to share some of the reporting mechanisms that we have here in Michigan, the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, the Attorney General's Office. MAPAC is always here as a resource, the Michigan Asian Pacific American Affairs Commission. Just call 911 if you ever feel threatened or harassed. If we haven't shared those resources, I can copy some and I can put them in the chat. But in the end, I think that, like, you know, if you're ever being made to feel less than, it's wrong. You should speak up.
Thank you, Aisha. It's still open to the panelists.
Yeah, I should mention that there's gross underreporting of hate crimes and hate incidents. And if something is occurring that doesn't rise to the level of a crime, it's still counted by the Department of Civil Rights. And they do take reports of hate incidents, which are verbal and doesn't include, a crime against person or property. And so don't forget, they do take those reports. And the things that are actionable in terms of hate speech plus injury to person or property, definitely contact the Attorney General and the Hate Crimes Unit. And they've got a reporting procedure that, lists all of the parameters for developing a case. So, that should be pursued.
Thank you so much, Roland.
You're welcome.
I just want to say I have to leave at 7. I had another event that started at 7. So I need to go, but I did pop my email in the chat box. Please visit coupa.housedems.com if you have any questions. You can email me, and you're feeling like you need support. If I'm not your state representative, I will find you someone that you can talk to, that you can share your concerns with. I really want to make sure that everyone is heard and that we provide people the tools. And so I really appreciate all of you who are here with me on the panel. I appreciate everyone who joined us today to speak. And all of you at APIA Vote, Rebecca, Dan, Ali, I'm sure I missed somebody, but thank you so much for what you do and what you're doing. And I have to give a small shout out to my former legislative intern, Joseph, who's out there and what you're saying, because you are right, Joseph. We within the APA community, we need to find solidarity as well. Sometimes we're so siloed. I remember this story that Kiran Ahuja, she was with in the Obama administration. She was running something during the Katrina disaster. And they sent Vietnamese translators down to New Orleans area, to the Louisiana border. And the fishing community spoke a completely different dialect of the language. And so we are so different. We are so, within the Indian community itself, we're so different. We're divided on, or we are diverse based on religious and linguistic lines. And so making sure that these different groups come together. You may have problems back in the old country or, whatever it is. But for example, in Troy right now, we're working with the Bangladeshi Americans, Indian Americans, and Pakistani Americans have come together around cricket, because that's something that unifies us. So find the things that we have common ground on. Pluralism is hard, but it is the only path to peace. It's something that, engaging that diversity is pluralism. And so we must constantly, make time to find that common ground and work on it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Padmakuppa. So we got a few minutes or so. So if there's anybody left on the panel that would like to speak, then we can open it up to the audience. Okay, Ali and Kevin, do you see any comments that are coming in that you would like to read off?
Yes, there are a few comments. Really proud of all of those who have contributed to this discussion. It is vitally important. My family and I stand alongside our APIA neighbors, friends, and loved ones against bigotry and violence. As a member of a labor union, in my case, the UAW, I would just mention that many collective bargaining agreements have diversity inclusion committees. Fully utilize these can be great forums and great vital opportunities for building unity, empathy, and solidarity across cultures, especially amongst the working class.
Thank you, Ali. We do,
talk about pay equity. One of the reasons we have pay equity is because of unions. If you are not in a union, you are not guaranteed pay equity. So I'm just saying, it's Women's History Month, solidarity.
Thank you, Rep. Coupa. Before you go, we did have one more question around policy. If you can just stay on to just answer that one, and then we'll come back to comments. So the question that we have are, what are some policies that are being put in place to protect the Asian American community and people of color in general right now?
We have a lot of policies proposed, but nothing will move when the people who hold the gavel don't see the need for that particular policy. So actually tonight, there's a city council meeting in Troy, And one of the biggest challenges that communities across the state are facing is that we have a sunset to the time when local units of government and civic bodies can meet remotely. Not everyone has the capacity to have city meetings or township board meetings or whatever public meetings are required right now with the small facilities that are available. For example, in Troy, we could probably manage, right? But there are many cities and townships and villages and counties across the state that don't have the spaces. And this is where we are challenged because the Republican legislature, there's a bipartisan bill package in the House and in the Senate. And they would allow us to extend the deadline for how much longer boards and committees and city bodies could meet virtually so that we protect public health and safety. But they're not even willing to take up those bills. So what are the policies? We all need to move to areas where people aren't listening to us. And more people voted for Democrats than voted. And I know APIA Vote is a nonpartisan organization. I'm trying to respect that. But at the same time, I have to be honest, it's really, really hard when good legislation gets ignored because it wasn't brought forward by a Republican and when they can't see it. So I try really hard to build relationships on the other side. And give you a quick example. One of my constituents wrote to me about the bee population. We all know that next month is Earth Month and we really care about bees and making sure that the bees aren't killed. And protecting bee populations. And there's a particular type of pesticide that a constituent wrote to me and said, can we ban that pesticide here in Michigan? Many countries in Europe have banned it. Our EPA has not banned it. Can we at least ban it here in Michigan? So I thought about it and I said, you know what? There are farmers who are impacted by this because bees are pollinators. It will affect their plants and their crops. And so let's see if we can find a Republican who will agree that this is a bad idea to use this particular pesticide. I understand the need to have some form of pesticide to help your crops so that they don't get damaged. But at the same time, we don't want to have pesticides that will harm the environment and will do further damage to the bee population. So, really trying to find ways to get Republicans who hold the gavel because they hold the majority in both the House and the Senate. We are fortunate that we have a governor who recognized that racism is a public health crisis and that we've been able to address some of the disparities that COVID has made absolutely visible. And so it's really important that we work with legislators across the aisle and across the state to bring in policies and have people come for lobby days and advocacy days. And that's something that APIA Vote and South Asian American Voices for Impact and Engage, there's so many organizations that do this. Really thankful for all of them, for working with the MAPAC commissioners and making sure that all voices are heard and that we make common sense policy, making sure nobody is harmed.
If I could also just jump in real quick, run for your commissions and boards or join them. It's so easy. I mean, I'm an Ann Arbor Human Rights Commissioner. It's not because I'm some big important person. I just applied and I got on. And we are working on an ordinance right now banning conversion therapy. We are working on an ordinance around Asian American hate. So look up commissions and boards in your city. Look up commissions and boards in your state and join them and get involved because your voice is important.
Thank you, Rep. Cooper and Angel. Thank you. And you all are important.
You all are. So we're going to move on to our last question that we have. And again, we want to take a moment to thank all of the panelists who took the time out today to come on board, as well as all of you who are our guests and our audience for taking the time out to listen to us and to allow us to give life to this platform. So thank you all for doing this. So our last question that we do have is, what resources is out there for anyone experiencing anti-Asian hate? So we kind of touched on it earlier, but now we're going to dive a little deeper into it. So if something happened, what resources exist out there for them? And this is open for the panel.
I'm going to drop some resources like Stop AAPI Hate. Roland, you have some of the information as well in regards to like the Asian American Policy Institute where you can report. I'll drop the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, the Attorney General. I can drop all that information in the chat.
Yeah, there's an OCA response to hate handbook that talks about how to deal with it, how to have a press conference, how to do a press release, how to do community organizing. That's a good resource, and I think I can share it with you. I can probably send it to Rebecca.
Yes, if there's any links that you're not sharing in the chat, please feel free to share with us, and then we will share with everyone that signed up for this webinar.
Sure, will do.
Those sound like good resources, especially since locally we should have all Asian American Pacific Islander groups be able to mobilize themselves if someone in the community experiences incidents of hate, that they don't have to go directly to the police or file with the civil rights, that they can go to people that they trust, other Asian communities, and know that they will get the mental support, the psychological support, and as well as the mobilization support to hold a press conference or bring the community to let them know about what's going on.
All right, thank you everyone for responding on that question. And just for the sake of time, we're going to move to the very last question that we have. But before we do that, I just wanted to make a note that there is also an app out there on your phones that you can get. And if I'm not mistaken, it's free. It's called OK2Say. And it's all one word, okay, and then the number 2, Say, S-A-Y, and you can find it in the app stores on most phones. So it is something that you can report if something does happen to you, and that can help get more numbers so people can study and see more visually the reports. But for the very, very last question that we have, and this is a little bit more of a sentimental question, so I'm going to ask this to the panelists before we wrap it up. For the very, very last question that we have, we ask all our panelists to describe your feelings with sharing your experiences and perspectives today, and then name one thing that somebody else said today that has touched you.
So this is for the panelists, just to clarify.
Yes.
Okay. Could you ask it again? I was like in thought.
Yeah, that's okay. The very last question that we have is describe your experience or describe your feelings with sharing today, and also name one thing that somebody else said that really touched you. And then we will open it up for the audience and then the Q&A at the end.
I think it's always good to share our experiences. It just allows us to recall what we've lived through, I guess, in our work in civil rights, that sort of thing. And what was said today that resonates with me, I was in a meeting with Hispanic Development Corporation, NAACP Detroit, and we had a discussion about race and our programming, and they all said, "We stand with you," because they know that this is really an important moment in the Asian American civil rights movement.
Yeah, I think that stories matter. You know, people think that if you come to a representative with a bunch of data, that's what's going to change their mind. But actually, it shows that people, I mean, we're empathetic, we're social creatures, we're animals. And people are the most moved, the most motivated by your story. And that's another reason to not just report, but like sharing experiences, I think is so powerful. So this was said somewhat by Roland, somewhat by others. But stories are powerful. And I think that API vote creating the space is extremely important. I think that having the diversity of the panelists and our experiences, it provided a platform that allowed us to tell our stories and why we're involved and why we care. And for other people to share their feelings as well. So thank you.
Thank you to API Vote Michigan.
Thank you. Now we'll open it up for Lily. Go ahead. I think you want to say something.
I just want to say thank you for having us. Thank you for this amazing event. I am so delighted and surprised that everyone pretty much saw the bigger picture, that as horrific as the Atlanta shootings were, that, there are bigger problems, and there will be more problems unless we address the racism and the supremacy and the managerial racism. And so I love that everybody was on the same page, it felt like, on this, because that's rarely talked about even after the Atlanta shootings. And yeah, it's wonderful to see so many people. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lily. So now we do open it up to the audience. As we mentioned earlier, this is the time for the Q&A, as well as any comments that you feel. So that same question is open to you as well as the audience members. And if you do have any questions for our panelists, this is the time.
Looks like we have a question from Linda.
Yes, go ahead, Linda. You can go ahead and unmute yourself now.
It was just more of a comment. I really want to say how much I appreciated everyone who participated today, because although we came together because of really a tragic incident in Atlanta, the one thing that I know I was feeling really down. My mom's an immigrant, and I have a lot of fear for her. She's in her 80s. And like most 80-year-olds, she just thinks she can go and do whatever she wants. She's, she has a very free spirit, but because of these difficult times, and she doesn't live in this state, I really have had some concerns. I think that listening to all of the panelists, they helped me to appreciate the fact that we have some really great people out there that are working and advocating for justice for everyone. And so I feel more confident today, most certainly, than I have been feeling in a while. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, we will let folks, if you want to just chime in, feel free to do so in the chat box. And then we'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our guests for participating in this episode. Representative Padma Kupa, Professor Roland Wong, MAPAC Commissioner Aisha Ghazi, Human Rights and Disability Community Activist Lily Chang, and all of our audience for participating. And we hope that everyone today feels empowered and has taken away some new perspective. Our team is really dedicated to help our community heal while bringing us together through a space of our own, even if it's just for a short period of time here today. And we encourage that please everyone continue to fight for justice, stand in solidarity with each other, APIA or not. Please continue to support each other.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here today. And thank you to our listeners and subscribers as well. We upload new audio episodes, as we mentioned, for Saturday of every month. Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can hear us on Spotify as well as SoundCloud, and then catch you all in the next episode, which we're going to be focusing on mental health in the APIA community. We know our fight is not over. We encourage everyone here today to join us on Saturday, the 27th at Spirit Plaza in Detroit for a rally as well. And here's the flyer.
Yes, we hope that, recently we've been getting a lot of calls from community members and emails today that we need to organize and we need to stand in solidarity. So API Vote Michigan, along with their partners, we are organizing a rally on Saturday, March 27th at 3 p.m. at Spirit Plaza, and we hope that you will join us. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. We'll just take like an extra last minute for any last minute comments or Q&As from the audience, and then we'll be wrapped up. And Ali and Kevin, feel free to read any that stick out to you that you would like to read.
There have been a lot of resources shared in a chat throughout the webinar, and we'd just like to restate that we will share them to the audience after the webinar.
We have quite a few comments thanking us for the event that we put together today. One in particular said, "I'm so glad for the conversation that we're having with each other. Let's keep standing together as Asians and African Americans and all other races that have been discriminated against. We are stronger together." We also have another that says, "So grateful for all of the panelists in APIA. And in particular, I'm in admiration of the women speaking here today. What an incredible path you are carving, wonderful role models for many to follow." Thank you so much to our panelists.
And I would say with that being said, again, thank you everyone for taking the time out today for joining us. Thank you every single one of our panelists from taking your time out as well and having this dialogue with us. I can definitely tell you this is not going to be the last time we're going to be doing this because we need more of these community discussions. It gives a platform, as our vision for this podcast was designed from the very beginning, to allow everyone to have a voice and to be able to speak and also feel safe. Like I mentioned earlier in our normal formula show, we're normally anonymous. So I just wanted to make that clear for the audience. This was a special episode. That's why we revered who we are. But for our future episodes, for our topics, if you want to come on and you want to speak on something and you want to feel the extra protection and safety, that's how we normally would do the show. But again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our subscribers. Thank you to all of our followers, and as well as thank you so much for our audience for taking the time to listen and have this dialogue with us. I know it's a very difficult time right now for every one of our communities, but this is exactly how we move forward. We have to be able to confront the most uncomfortable conversations and have action plans to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. And I also want to just take a moment. There's still folks logged on. Usually as soon as we hit the Zoom is over, people are like all over the place and ready to run. And I don't want to take this meeting, like not going over time, but I also just want to take this moment to thank my wonderful team here at API Vote Michigan, Kevin, Dan, Ellie, and the board of directors. We couldn't have that joined today. We couldn't have done it without you guys. These folks are fighting day in and day out for social justice. So thank you guys. I'm so grateful for the work that you guys do. Thank you. And I've also allowed for even the attendees who are still here, if you guys want to come on and just say a few words on the mic, please feel free to do so. Like I said, I do not want to end this call because there's just so many folks still on here and I would love to continue the conversation. But for everyone else, if you have to go, it's totally fine. Please take care of yourselves. And thank you again. Greatly appreciate everyone joining us. I'll be here. So if you guys want to hang out with me, please do.
Open mic.
Hi, this is Danny again. I just want to say thank you for having this call and being so forward and open about what's happening in our community. I want to reiterate that if anyone would like to get an extra boost on some events that they're running, I currently run a social media page for the stuff through our last visual on Sunday with Over the Moon and Whenever We're Needed, which is a smaller group that just started with 2 young women. And I'm sure they would love to attend Saturday's event. So I will send my email to the panelists for that so I can pass it along. And then on top of it, I'm the communications director for AIGA Detroit, part of a larger board. And it's just really inspiring to see different folks like this through APIA Vote come on and talk. And I would love to have some of you attend something on the Detroit chapter, like creative AIGA group as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Donnie. We're definitely going to take you up on the offer, and we'll make sure to connect with you after this webinar. And if we can really promote our flyers so that we can actually have the community show up, that would be really appreciated. And we do have City of Detroit also supporting us on this event as well. Thank you, Donnie. Lisa Gray is also here. She's also helping us organize our rally on Saturday. Lisa, I don't know if you would like to say anything. Thank you. I see your contact information, Donnie. And we will be compiling a list of all the resources that was shared today in an email to everyone that attended today. Okay, Lisa, no problem. On the computer with no mic, no worries.
I also see Pina here. She is currently the president of the Council of Asian Pacific Americans, CAPA. Pina, do you have anything you would like to say?
I really appreciated Pina's comments in the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Rebecca. I do appreciate the invite, and I really thank everyone for sharing your views, your experiences, and just that, the viewpoints that were shared today were interesting. One of the thoughts that I was just sharing with a colleague of mine is I wonder if we would get a different perspective if we invited diverse opinions from the corporate world. I see that is one voice that is missing here tonight, and I believe the voice of economy is a very, very strong voice and is not represented here. So maybe that is something that we can do in the future, because the economy drives a lot of action, and the economy sometimes drives a lot of hate crimes as well. The economy drives a lot of policy making, which we saw in the previous administration. So I wonder if perspectives from leaders who are Asian in our community might be valuable for us to hear. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Pina. Yes, I couldn't have agreed any more to what you said. API Vote Michigan does have this platform, this podcast that we're all on right now on a monthly basis, and we welcome different perspectives and corporates to also come on. This is, we've been doing this all of 2021. This is going to be our fourth episode, maybe? Fourth team? Help me out.
That's the fourth, I believe.
This is a special episode. This is our fourth episode, and we do welcome community members to come on as anonymously if they wish to do so and share those perspectives. So that's something that we'll definitely take into account for our future episodes as well. Okay, unless anyone else has anything to say, I will have to be that one person who what is that called? Party pooper closes out the meeting. So I will go ahead and close out our virtual meeting. Yep, Kevin did put in links on the chat box. So please do check us out on social media where we'll be posting this episode as well as other resources. And you also can get that in the email as well. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. And we hope that you will join us on the 27th. Thank you
everyone.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.